Good evening, Bruins. My name is Angela Scales, and I serve as a Senior Director of Bruin Connections and Alumni Career Programs here at UCLA. Tonight, we're excited to launch our first Bruin Career Insights episode of 2018. We launched this series a year ago, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to have career conversations with Bruins all around the globe. Tonight, we're trying something new, and we're so happy to have you with us. This episode will be a very special one. It's Bruin Career Insights Mentor Edition. For those who aren't familiar with the UCLA Alumni Mentor Program, it's in its 13th year and it's facilitated through UCLA One. So for those who are watching and would like to participate, you still can. If you'd like some detailed information about the program, you can visit our website at alumni.ucla.edu/mentor. For upcoming episodes in the series, we would love to hear from you about the topics and industries that you're most interested in. Please send us feedback and suggestions for upcoming topics to careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu. Tonight's episode is powered by membership, so I want to take a moment to thank our Blue, Gold, and Life members. You make events like this possible for the entire UCLA community. If any of you are interested in upgrading your membership, you'll see a link in the live chat. Using that live chat function, you can ask questions throughout tonight's episode. So don't be shy. Our best interviews are the most interactive ones, so ask away. For tonight's special episode, I'm handing over the hosting mic to Nolan Gunsolly, the student director of the UCLA Alumni Mentor Program. So take it away, Nolan.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. I'm so excited to kick off our first episode about mentorship. Hi, everyone. I'm Nolan Gunsolly. I'm a third-year electrical engineering major here at UCLA and the student director of the Alumni Mentor Program. So our special guest tonight is Devon Dickau. And Devin is a manager in Deloitte's Human Capital Consulting practice and the chief of staff for the Diversity and Inclusion Client Service Center of Excellence. Passionate about nurturing, empowering communities in challenging environments and aligning corporate strategy with social values, Devin is a certified Deloitte Greenhouse Lab facilitator and advises clients across sectors on diversity and inclusion, culture, talent, and leadership. Devin graduated from UCLA in 2007 with a BA in American Literature and Culture, and in 2015 with an MBA from Anderson School of Management. He also holds an MED in Technology, Innovation, and Education from Harvard. So, Devin, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how your current career path led you to where you are today?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nolan. I'm so excited to be here on this chat with all of you. So as Nolan mentioned, I went to UCLA for undergrad, and before I came to UCLA as a student is when I think I started to figure out and decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I will say, to start it off, my career path was very meandering and it evolved a lot, but that was a lot of the fun. And for me, I think as I reflect back on my experience, it really started in high school and where I found a passion for activism and making the world a better place. And that carried me into college. And that manifested at UCLA as my involvement in Dance Marathon, which I know is now PAC. And I was really involved in Dance Marathon as a dancer and then as a committee member. And I found the intersection between media and my activism to be really interesting. So I took a lot of film classes at UCLA. I was actually the film and TV editor for the Daily Bruin as well. I did internships with film production companies and kind of nurtured my creativity through my passion for filmmaking while also nurturing my passion for activism. And then there was a third component, and my passion for education started to really come out during my time at UCLA as well. I was actually a orientation counselor, which I know has also changed names since I was a student. It's now new student in transition programs. But those three passions for education, for activism or social impact, and for media or film are really what carried me through the rest of my career. And after I graduated from UCLA, at first I thought I was going to go into the film industry, and I ended up pivoting into social impact, and I started my career working for an NGO, a non-governmental organization in sub-Saharan Africa. Based in Tanzania, doing HIV/AIDS work, which was kind of my continuation of my work with Dance Marathon. I obviously was life-changing. It kind of regrounded me in what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And when I came back to the US, instead of going into the film industry to become an assistant and maybe pushing around mail for an agency or something, I realized that I wanted to do something a little bit more meaningful. And I had made a lot of connections at UCLA as an undergrad. And so I pretty easily found my way into a job working at UCLA. So in addition to my 2 degrees from UCLA, I also worked at UCLA for almost 3 years. I would say maybe a triple Bruin, if you could call it that. And during my time at UCLA, I worked a little bit in development, but eventually helped found the Parent and Family Programs Department, serving first-generation families. And I also worked with veteran students and our Bruin Guardian scholars who were former foster youth, and a little bit with our homeless student population, and really loved working for UCLA. But I was missing that creative piece that I mentioned, that third element. And I applied to grad school for the first time to fulfill that. So at Harvard, I studied that intersection between media, technology, and social change, but at a graduate school of education. So it was infused with educational theory. And from there, got my dream job working in social impact consulting, where I supported celebrities and filmmakers in really creating social impact in whatever way was most meaningful for them. So for films, it was, how do we create a social impact campaign to pair with the film? For high-profile individuals, for example, I worked with Lady Gaga. It was, how do they make change using their power and influence? And then I pivoted into business school, and I could talk more about why I made that pivot a little bit later. But I went to business school to get kind of that business acumen, and landed at Deloitte after business school. And I feel really lucky now, as the chief of staff of our diversity and inclusion services, our consulting services, to once again to be able to blend my passions for education, for social impact, and for media and technology, but in the consulting setting. So it's pretty amazing. I really do truly love my job every day. And I also finally make good money. It took a while to get there, but that's important too.
Oh my God, that's absolutely incredible. So you've traveled the world, helped a ton of people, engage in media and UCLA almost 3 times. That's absolutely insane. I am amazed.
Through and through.
That's insane. So you've pretty much found a way to pretty much knot your passion into your career. How did you go about navigating a path to find a way to do that? Were those conversations that you had during your job interview at Deloitte, or was that much earlier on or much later on?
I think my passions have always been part of my career search. So I have never taken a job that I didn't feel like would allow me to feel fulfilled intrinsically and feel like I was making an impact in the world. I think I'm able to articulate this now. I don't think I was before, but what I can articulate now is that there's 3 things that are really important to me in whatever I'm doing professionally. Number 1 is making an impact on the world. I want to know that every day I'm making some sort of change. I'm making others' lives better. Number 2, it's that I feel challenged every day, that I'm in an environment that's fast-paced, that's intellectually challenging, that I'm going to learn something new every day on the job, because who knows what's coming next. And I've found that in all of my career so far. And then third, it's about people on an individual level. So the social impact piece is kind of more macro. The people piece to me is more micro, and it relates to mentoring as well. I really love mentoring, coaching, managing people. And I need to be in a field, in a job where I can manage people. That's just, those types of relationships are really important to me. So realizing that those 3 things were important to me, they align with my values, that drove, if I look back, every career decision that I made. And so it was less about specific industries that I wanted to work in or the specific titles that I wanted to have, and more about, I'm going to be me and live my values and only take jobs or take career pivots that will take me in a direction where I can continue to have a job where every day I feel excited because these are all the things that I want to be doing. So for me, it's not separated at all. At Deloitte, it was about taking a role which I could live my values every day. And for me, if that stops happening tomorrow, then I'll look for another job. So it's just a decision that I made, and it's very important to me.
Wow, that's incredible. You know, there's a lot written about bringing your authentic self to the workplace, and a lot of people wonder about how to do that. It sounds like you've done that extremely successfully over the years, just pursuing who you are and your jobs and your passion. But what would you have as advice for grad students or anyone who's just graduated who really wants to do that as well, bring your authentic self to the workplace and work toward their personal goals?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you can't extricate bring your authentic self to being happy or succeeding in a job. There's research actually that supports the fact that when we bring our full selves to work, and covering is a concept that was coined more than a decade ago about how we downplay or hide certain parts of who we are. And that can be identity characteristics like being LGBT, which I identify as a part of that community, but also like being a man. I could cover being a man if I'm in a very female-driven environment, and there are certain qualities that we associate with different parts of our identities, and we can choose to downplay or hide those qualities or those characteristics. And there's research that shows when people don't cover, which people, all types do, but when we don't cover, we're more productive, we're more efficient, we're more creative, we work better in teams, we're better employees overall. So my advice is that you will be a better employee, you will succeed in school, you will succeed at work if you truly decide to bring your full self. And sometimes that means maybe making sacrifices. Perhaps not every work environment is great for every single person. And it's not on your shoulders to change a culture unless that's something that you've committed to. But I do think it's important for our personal happiness for us to be authentic and bring our full selves in that way. And I think there's another aspect to it too. I think it's really reflecting and realizing what we want. And part of authenticity is being self-reflective and knowing ourselves and asking ourselves questions and challenging ourselves. And for me, a lot of that has been being open to evolutions. And when I was 16, if you asked me why I was thinking about going to UCLA, it was because I wanted to be a film director. And that was the only career path for me. But I am just as happy, if not more now, not having ever been a film director, because I've been able to do all of the things that I love in other ways. And I think that's authenticity in a way also. I've been able to be reflective enough to know that not everything happens as planned, but that's part of life.
Wow, that's insane. That's incredible that you have so many facets of yourself that, in the creative side and the business side, and, kind of going back to what you said about your kind of sudden transition into the business world and getting your MBA, what were the factors that made you decide to go get that MBA?
Yeah, so I was working in social impact consulting after Harvard, and honestly, it was my dream job. I was working in the entertainment industry with amazing clients doing social impact work. And actually my first client was a documentary film called Bully, which is an educational film. It's about schools. And so like that nexus, those three things that I'm really passionate about that I studied at Harvard, here was a project that I got to work on. And I worked on the cause of school bullying for actually about a year, which is how I ended up working with Lady Gaga as well. And so it was a dream job in so many ways. And so when I tell people about this job, like, why would you ever leave that? And so I can tell you it was a few reasons. And I went to business school right after for a few reasons. One, I realized as I was evaluating myself and self-reflecting that I had a broad range of skills, but the skills that I lacked were business skills. I had the creative side, I had the change maker side, I even had some government and policy experience and perspectives. I knew a lot about the world, but I had never done anything in the corporate sector. And let's face it, we are a world, a society driven by corporations. And so to really succeed in whatever I wanted to do, I realized I needed that skill set. Number two, I realized that a key to social change was also the private sector. So we would sit in meetings with companies, and it was almost like we were speaking different languages. Here we were, the social impact people, and then the corporate people were over there, and it's like we were talking past each other using different words. But when you think about collective impact, how can we all work together to make the world a better place? I realized that we need people who understand both sides. We need to be, as social impact makers, to be able to talk to and dialogue with those folks that are coming from the corporate sector. What are their motivations? What do they want out of a relationship? Why are they here, and what drives them? Because I think there was a moment that I realized that social good or social impact isn't just in the traditional sense. It's not necessarily, I'm going to go into sub-Saharan Africa and teach in rural villages, which I have taken that path. But for a lot of people, impact is also being the VP of marketing and sales at a company that touches people every day. Like, imagine Facebook is a corporation, but it's changing lives. It's changing the world. It's just not in the way that I previously had realized. So those two reasons combined, and then paired with the fact that we as a business were not succeeding. So the social impact firms that I was working with were struggling as businesses. We were barely making ends meet. I was being paid almost nothing. Just the pragmatic reason behind it was there as well. I was working with super smart, passionate people, but no one had an MBA. No one had that corporate sector experience. And so I chose to go to business school to get that experience. And I came in with a pretty clear purpose. And I think that allowed me to get a lot out of the MBA experience because of that.
Wow, that's incredible. And we already have actually someone listening to you right now wondering about more of your educational background experience. So we have a question from Tasia. Your educational background is pretty unique. what led you to specifically pursue the Master's in Technology, Innovation, and Education from Harvard?
Yeah, so I was working at UCLA. I had worked 2 academic years at this point, or I guess a year and a half of academic years at UCLA. And I loved working in education. I loved working for my alma mater. It was interesting working for the school that you attended. You kind of see behind the curtains in the best way and the worst ways. So it was really intriguing. And I found some of my first mentors also when I was working at UCLA. But for me, the main reason I applied to grad school is I was looking for that next boost and to help me figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So for both of my grad school experiences, it was exploratory in some way, but for my first grad school experience, it was more exploratory. And for me, it was bringing in the creative element back into my career path. I could see it getting away from me. I didn't see how my future working at UCLA in the specific place, the specific department that I was in would allow me to express myself creatively. And I really wanted to study that aspect of it. So Harvard has an amazing program, but I also considered a few other schools. I considered grad school at UCLA. I considered Stanford. I considered University of Pennsylvania. And after getting into all of them, which was amazing, I had options. And Harvard's program, honestly, was the only one that was designed in a way where I could have the exact experience I wanted. And if I were to say my thesis in a sentence, I spent a year studying and exploring how media and technology can empower young people to make the world a better place. That's pretty awesome. So I studied media and technology during a time when Twitter was just starting, YouTube was just becoming a big thing, Facebook was only a few years old. The idea of TV being more popular than films or movies in the way that they are now was not even conceivable. So I got to study the media landscape at a time that was really, really interesting. And of all places, the best school for education in the world. So it was a no-brainer. And I loved the experience, despite the cold.
Wow. Yeah, pretty easy experience to go to Harvard and just decide to go. That's incredible that you're able to do that. When you were actually applying to Harvard and to UCLA as well, obviously with your huge background and your work experience, how did you go about framing your narrative in a way that made you stand out as an applicant? Obviously, you have a lot that stands out yourself, but do you have any advice for grad students or people looking to get into grad school?
Yeah, I think what I found both times around is that the authentic story that I told about my life and my passions is what differentiated me. I think you have to have the key basic factors, the minimum requirements, if you will. So with business school, for example, I hadn't done math in a really long time. I took calculus when I was 16 at a community college, passed through my quantitative reasoning requirement at UCLA, and didn't take any math at UCLA, not one single math class. I know, opposite of you, Nolan. So I hadn't done math in 10 years when I applied to business school. And so there was nothing on my resume nor my transcript or anything that showed that I could do quant, and business school is very quant heavy. So for me, that was a place I had to differentiate myself. And so I studied a lot for the quantitative part of the GMAT. I actually took a class specifically on the math section, and I raised my score by 50 points to put me in the 97th percentile for math, because I knew that was the way I had to show that I could do that. So that's the minimum requirement type situation. A top school like Anderson wants to know that you can do certain things. But I think ultimately, and Anderson's unique because students interview candidates as well. So I was a student interviewer my second year. And I can tell you that what we talked about most was presence and passion and story. And so I think those are the things that differentiate us. It's, can I see you, if I'm going to admit you to my grad school, and this goes for Harvard and for UCLA, am I going to see you succeed here? Can you contribute based on your unique background to this environment, to your classmates' learning? And then are you going to change the world afterwards? Are you going to found something, design something, be a leader in your field? I mean, UCLA and Harvard don't want to admit students who are not going to be leaders in some way. And so not only do you need to be a leader on campus, because that's part of the student experience, but they're investing in you, you're paying too, but they're investing in you ultimately for that spot, so that in 10 years or 20 years, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a leader, and you can change the world in some way. So all those things are to say, be authentic, be true to yourself, tell your story, and express passion.
That's insane. And now that you mentioned leadership and how you're such an amazing leader, I can't imagine that you ever got to this point without having some role models yourself. Did you ever have a mentor? Who was your first mentor?
I had many mentors. I think it's hard to, especially early in life, to really pinpoint them because there are so many older folks, more experienced. They could be siblings, they could be other relatives, they could be friends even, who really shape your perspective of the world and inspire you. But I think the first kind of official mentor that I had was actually an artist in San Diego, which is where I grew up. And his name is Joe Nairi. And I took his classes when I was younger. And he invited me to be his assistant when I was 13. And actually my first job ever was as an artist assistant for Joe at the San Diego Zoo, which is a pretty cool first job. So I was a muralist and an artist assistant, assistant teacher at the San Diego Zoo. And Joe, I ended up having that relationship with Joe where he was my mentor and my supervisor in this role all the way through my second summer after sophomore year at UCLA. So it lasted for a long time. And just, he's an all around good human being, the way he sees the world and his talent and his passion for creativity, but he was also an educator. So when I think about all of the things that I'm passionate about, I listed them all: education, the arts, and making the world a better place. And I really feel like Joe encapsulated all three of those things, so no wonder. But I also have a really significant mentor who was my boss when I worked at UCLA. So I would say Joe is my first kind of formal official mentor, but Jackie Gilliam, who worked at UCLA for a long time, was my boss when I worked at UCLA and continues to have an impact on me and inspire me. And I think good mentors are the people who stay with you. And when you think about becoming a leader yourself or becoming a mentor yourself, you think back to them and what did they do? And let me model myself after their behavior. And those are two that particularly stand out for me.
Wow. How did you ever realize when they were mentoring you in that process that they were your mentor? Did you ever shape your opinion around that? Did you actually realize that they were mentoring you, or was it more of just you realize afterward?
Yeah, I think not at first, but then into the process for sure. I think part of it is that you realize mentorship or any mentoring relationship is a two-way street. That's going to be a theme of what I say today. I think it's about giving and receiving from both the mentor and the mentee. And I think the realization came to me in both of these instances when I realized that I was giving both of these individuals and future mentors as much from the relationship as they were giving me. So they were giving me advice and wisdom, but I was giving advice and wisdom and perspective and creativity in return. And I think that dynamic two-way relationship was so important. But I also think mentorship in some ways is a structured thing to some degree. So I think both parties have to realize that there's something going on there. I think that you can have informal mentors, but even informal mentors, you have to try a little bit because there's so many, especially with social media these days, there's so many people in your life that you can have relationships with. And in a way, you have to choose the people that are valuable to you, that are important to you, and prioritize them in your life. And again, that's two-way. These are people that have chosen to prioritize you. So I think that's a moment of realization too, like, oh, this person is prioritizing and investing in me, and I'm doing the same for them.
Wow, interesting. Incredible that you're able to realize it and recognize how much a mentor truly contributes to your life and to who you are today without really knowing it at the moment necessarily, but also, having that faint realization of it at the time. Wow. So when did you first become a mentor yourself?
I like to think that I've always been a mentor. I think that I mentioned that one of the three things that's so important to me in my career is coaching, leading, mentoring. And I think that goes for my life in general as well. I take so much pride and happiness from a relationship with someone where I feel like I can teach them. And again, they can teach me in return. I think those types of relationships are so important. And even reflecting back to, I don't know, like elementary school, I was always a person that prided myself on being a go-to for others and helping others. So while that wasn't a mentor relationship in the way we're talking about now, I enjoyed being that person. I mean, I remember a time in 7th grade that I was actually the only person in the class that got this math problem right. It was a probability problem. And my math teacher asked me to walk around and help the rest of my classmates through it. So we had like 20 minutes or something to everyone could resolve the problem because again, I was the only person that got it right. And I remember it so vividly because of the opportunity to be that support for my classmates, to be in that mentor-like capacity. But I think the first time I formally became a mentor was when I was a student at UCLA. And I think being an orientation counselor allowed me to mentor incoming students who I maintained relationships with throughout their time at UCLA, some of whom I'm still friends with, actually. And then I became part of the UCLA mentor program upon graduation. It was a no-brainer.
Wow, great. And now at UCLA, when did you first decide to become involved in the alumni mentor program here at UCLA?
Yeah, so I've been involved as an alum pretty actively since graduation. I have done various things. I was the co-chair of the UCLA Young Alumni Development Council, so I was on that council for a few years, and I'm now the co-president of the Lambda Alumni Association, which is our LGBT alumni organization. So those are a few ways that I've expressed I'm also a lifetime member for the Alumni Association. Those are a few ways that I've expressed my Bruin pride post-undergrad graduation. But I think maybe 2 or 3 years after graduation is when I thought to myself, okay, I think I really have something to offer in a formal capacity, and started to get involved in things like D12s and other things, or Dinner to Fall Strangers, for those who might not know, and joined the mentorship program officially. I can't remember how long ago it was, but I've been part of it for a total of 3 or 4 years. So I haven't done it every year because, as I mentioned, prioritization is really important to me, and I wanted to be able to prioritize it in the years that I committed to the program. So I've been a part of it for several years, and I've really loved that experience.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you liked it. We are happy to have you as a mentor, and I'm sure everyone else is too in the program as well. So we have a question from Jarrett. Moving it back to human capital consulting practice.
My dog's speaking, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One second.
Sure.
I'm back. You made an appearance.
Oh my gosh. So we have a question from Jarrett from the live chat. He asks, how did you find a position in human capital within a company known for finance? To follow up, if you can narrow in on one or a couple, what has been the most rewarding experiences at Deloitte?
Yeah, so Deloitte, for those who don't know, is a global professional services firm with almost 300,000 employees around the world. And the fact of the matter is Deloitte does everything. Like, any problem or challenge that a company feels like it can't solve itself, Deloitte can help them with. So when you open that can of worms and realize that Deloitte does so many different things, you can find your niche in a place like Deloitte pretty easily. I found my way to human capital consulting specifically because when I was in business school, it's one of the areas that recruits at top business schools. They have a sect of top schools that they recruit from, and Anderson is one of them. And it was a learning curve. I had never heard of human capital consulting before coming to Anderson for grad school. I actually didn't really even know anything about management consulting in general. I was not involved in the consulting club in undergrad. It was never something that was on my radar. One of my uncles is a partner at a competing firm, but I just knew he traveled a lot, so I didn't really know anything about it. And Deloitte's brand has really evolved over the last 10 years from being an accounting and tax-focused organization to being more consulting-driven. We were actually ranked the 4th best consulting firm in the world recently, which is higher than we're ranked in some of our other areas. So it is a key part. It's actually the most profitable part of our business. And human capital consulting, when you get down to it, is what makes any organization run. It's about the people, because people are the key to an organization's success. And so for me, being so people-driven, I want to make the world a better place. I love working with people. It was a pretty good fit to get the exposure to Fortune 500 companies, which is like a business school within a business school. It's like business school 2.0, to get to work with these amazing companies every day, but then also work for Deloitte Consulting. So I work for a huge business, consulting with huge businesses, and doing human capital work is a way for me to express my passion, especially now that I do diversity and inclusion, but also get that really traditional business type of exposure and type of experience. So, it was a path. I talked to a lot of people. I met with career advisors. I read a lot. It's, for me, as I've said a few times, my career path is about self-discovery and self-reflection, and landing on human capital was a product of that.
Wow, that's insane. It kind of almost sounds like your transition to business school and figuring out, it's almost another side of things that you need to realize to be able to learn and apply to service and outreach, which is interesting.
Most definitely, yeah.
Awesome. And actually, we have a question from Gus kind of back about that one again. From a pragmatic point of view, how would you recommend recent graduates to finance their graduate education? Master's degree is expensive enough. And secondly, how did you prepare to finance for them?
Yeah, so I would say out of all of my debt, a majority is from my 1 year at Harvard. So grad school can be very expensive. So my debt from that 1 year is significantly greater than my debt from the 6 years at UCLA. Totally worth it. But I think there are a few ways of thinking about financing your education. I think for number one, you can be creative. You don't necessarily need to go to a top school. Those schools can be harder to get into, but also harder to get financial aid from because the scholarships are going to a certain cream of the crop, however that school defines it. And so it's just that much more competitive to get fully funded for those schools. A place like the Harvard Graduate School of Education actually gives very few scholarships because they know people will come. So they give everyone like a $5,000 fellowship, which is, at least that's what it was when I was there. And it just brings the tuition down a little bit. So you feel a little bit special. But I took out loans for Harvard. So that was the main way that I financed my graduate school education there. I also did work study. So I qualified for work study and worked about 20 hours a week during that year at Harvard, but in a job that supported my career goals. So I advised undergraduate students on public service careers. I worked in a center that they have for public service and public interest. And then at Anderson, actually funded it mostly through scholarships. So I was awarded a scholarship that funded 90% of my tuition for both years. And that came from me partly choosing Anderson because they gave me that offer. So combination of my GMAT score, my GPA at UCLA and at Harvard were very high, essays. So being a competitive applicant can qualify you for those scholarships. But I think also thinking about the facets of your identity that might open doors for other pools of money. So at Anderson, for example, a significant amount of our female classmates get a scholarship from what's called the Forte Foundation, which supports women exploring business degrees or going into the corporate sector. And so there are pools of money available for certain identity groups. And I definitely looked at some of those as possibilities as well. So I think the money exists. And MBAs are so versatile. But also for business school, I'll say there are some companies that will pay for your graduate education if they know that you'll use it. So that's the other option to explore. So if you work at Deloitte coming from undergrad, for example, and then choose to go into business school after 4 years, Deloitte will pay for your tuition to business school, as long as you stay for 2 years after graduation, and some other graduate degrees as well, but usually an MBA. And Deloitte's not the only company that does that. Deloitte also does that post-business school. So if you intern for Deloitte and then get an offer to go back after you graduate, they'll pay for your second year of business school. So there are incentives like that in the corporate sector that exist. If you work in the nonprofit space like I did when you're younger, you won't have any of those, but that's why I was able to get some of those scholarships because I had committed my 20s to working in the nonprofit and education worlds.
Wow, that's great. Okay, well, we're kind of going to transition back to your career path. We have a pre-submitted question from Nebula. So if you do not feel like you can be your full self at work, does that mean it's time to look for a different position or work culture? Or is each case very different, i.e., the people and culture are different in each company, regardless of the industry or other reasons?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think it is a very personal decision. I would never want to tell someone to quit just because on a daily basis they don't feel like their full selves at work, because there's also pragmatic factors in place. If the job is in the right location and pays the right amount and can get you to that next step that you're hoping for in your career. But I think authenticity and bringing our full selves to work is directly linked to our happiness. And so I would say if there are ways of fulfilling our career goals in a culture, in a work environment that does feel supportive and does feel like a place where we can bring our full selves to work, go out and find it. Those places do exist, and companies are more and more becoming aware of the fact that they need to actively put programs and efforts in place to help their employees feel like they can be authentic and bring their full selves. It's literally something that I hear employees of some of my clients saying as they walk down the halls. So it's on the mind of corporations. And I would say, again, pragmatic reasons aside, if that's not a barrier, then it's definitely worth exploring other options. I think we all want to feel comfortable in our own skin. And the fact that we spend at least 40 hours a week, if not more, at our workplace. I mean, I work a lot more than that. If I didn't feel happy and that I could be my full self at my job, that's at least 60 hours, if not closer to 80 sometimes, I would have left a year. I would have left so long ago. It would not be a place where I'm working today. So I think you have to be true to yourself, and hopefully, knowing there's so many places to work out there, hopefully you can find one that allows you to be you.
It's incredible, and hopefully everyone can find one of those amazing fits that actually does fit their personality. We have someone who's actually, it sounds like, similar to you. We have a question from Haley. She asks, coincidentally, my passions also include helping others, education, and media. Have you come across any additional careers that incorporate 2 or 3 of these interests?
Yeah, so I'll tell you all the things that I've considered doing. I think at the end of the day, it's about leaning more on one versus the other. I think, so for example, I'm leaning more on the social impact and education side of it right now than I am the media side. So some of my clients are media companies, but I'm not creating films every day, for example. So I think that has to be a factor. But some of the other things that I've considered are, for example, corporate social responsibility jobs. So working in the corporate sector, for example, a film studio, doing social impact work in the community. And a lot of corporations do education work as part of their foundations or philanthropic efforts. So I think those are options. I've also considered other jobs at either educational nonprofits or universities. Universities are like cities. So universities, which are educational institutions, and in many cases, like UCLA, nonprofits as well, they have so many different types of jobs. So you could do something creative, like work in the marketing department or work for the film school at a place like UCLA, which gives you outlets that are diverse in that way. Another thing is consulting is broader than just what I'm talking about. So I'm saying a very specific type of consulting. I work at Deloitte Consulting now. We are a very large management consulting firm, but I also worked in consulting before at boutique agencies. We had 9 employees at one of the places I worked. We had 11 at one of the other places I worked. So very small organizations. You can also consult independently, so as a freelancer. So all of these are definitions of consulting. And when you're a consultant, you can really do whatever you want. So finding a boutique firm or building a career, a brand for yourself around the area that you're interested in, find that intersection, find what you want. I've also looked at nonprofit jobs that are kind of either in the media space and or the education space. Like there's a great arts nonprofit that I'm on the board of called Hollywood Heart, and we do arts programming in schools. So that's an outlet for me. I really think there's so many options, and I found out about all of these options by networking, by talking to as many people as possible. I'm a huge LinkedIn user, so using LinkedIn all the time. I think, again, it's about exploration and self-reflection.
Wow, okay, that's perfect, because Lisa Maria is asking just about your passion, self-reflection right here. She says, your passions and interests are so fine-tuned. What advice can you give to wandering undergraduates who haven't found their passions just yet?
Well, thank you for saying it's fine-tuned. It was not fine-tuned when I was 20 years old. So let me just say that to start. I think, number one, business school really teaches us how to articulate our stories. So I'm very well practiced in talking about my passions and my interests because business school teaches you that skill. But even then, I think just being, again, self-reflective is really important, and being open to pivots is really important. So I think the advice that I would give to someone who feels like they're meandering is talk to as many people as possible. That includes reading as well. So for example, if human capital consulting sounds interesting to you, then go read Deloitte's Human Capital Trends Report. It's a 70-page report about what's happening in the world around human capital. If that type of thing is interesting to you, maybe that's a career path to walk down a little bit further and talk to a few folks. It's networking. So again, LinkedIn is a great source. So Bruins are well connected, and use the platform UCLA or use LinkedIn to find other Bruins, whether they're recent alumni or maybe even retired, who are doing or have done things that you're interested in, and just ask them what a day is like and what they've done in their careers. And then for me, being open-minded is a huge part of it. I would have never imagined that I landed where I am today. And I could have not articulated 10 years ago that this is even a job. But one of the things that I say about my career path is that almost every job I've had actually didn't exist before I had it. So that's something else to keep in mind. I know that articulating your passions is a part of it, but once you do articulate your passions, how do you find that right job that's a match? I found jobs that allowed me to be creative within those jobs. And I found that a through line of my career is I like to be an entrepreneur. So I haven't founded my own business, but I've been entrepreneurial in every organization that I've been a part of. I founded a department when I worked at UCLA. I now helped co-found and lead the service offering now that I'm at Deloitte. And kind of creating new things, building within organizations is something that I really love and I'm good at. So again, there's so many ways that we can find our passions. And being open to pivots and being open to change, I think, is really important to it, because to the process, because who knows what's out there. And you could have a conversation with someone who's doing something that you don't feel like you're interested in at all, but they could say one sentence that grabs your attention, and that can open a whole new door.
Wow, how weird. So you've almost created everything. Almost all your opportunities are created by you for your own self, almost, for your own good and for the good of others too.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a sense of purpose and to be able to articulate what you want. So when I was 3 months into my job at UCLA, actually my first title was development assistant. I was helping with fundraising for UCLA, and fundraising was okay, but there was an opportunity to help think about how do we serve the parents and families of UCLA students who aren't of means to financially support beyond paying for their students' tuition or helping to support their students' tuition. We thought there's this whole group, especially of first-generation families, first-generation parents who didn't experience UCLA themselves, to be engaged and included in the UCLA experience. So that whole program, that whole team didn't exist before. And so I helped kind of craft the proposal for this department, and I was the founding assistant director of this program and this effort. And part of that was just me raising my hand and saying, I'm interested in this. Let me help solve this problem. I have ideas. Let me drive forward. And all of those things were really important for me to get from here to there. And I ended up getting promoted twice in my 2.5 years working at UCLA because I was driven and because I just kept moving forward. And I never thought I'd be an assistant director of a parent and family programs department at a university. Again, it was nothing I ever articulated in my dreams when I was 16 years old or younger, but I went with it and it was an amazing job.
Wow, incredible. That's insane that your journey is so complex. So we have a live chat question again. You're involved in so many different things, and you mentioned that prioritization is very important to you. How do you prioritize and find balance in the personal and professional aspects of your life?
It's a great question and something that I have always struggled with. I think when I was at UCLA, I prided myself, so this is as an undergrad, I prided myself on not sleeping very much. I'm not saying you should do that, but I was that type of person. I slept 4 or 5 hours a night many times. I spent so much time doing extracurriculars. I mentioned editor for the Daily Bruin. I was on executive committee for a dance marathon. I was an orientation counselor, among several other things. I was really involved with campus. I also had a job, so I worked 20 hours a week. During most of my time at UCLA, I actually paid. My parents could not afford to support much of my education, so I paid for most of my undergraduate education myself with my various jobs. So all of those things that kept me really busy. But I also realized that there were certain things that were important to me. So I went to class, but did I spend as much time on classwork every day as I could have? No, because I was prioritizing maybe extracurriculars or my job. And then the way that landed in college is that I was just tired and exhausted all the time. And I realized after graduation, I couldn't do that forever. And I definitely can't do that now. And so it's been a journey for me. I was never a person who could easily say no to things. I was never a person who could articulate that I was prioritizing. I would say, I don't have time for, is what I would always say. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. But what I've shifted to probably about 5 years ago or so was I'm prioritizing this instead of this, and realizing that there are only a certain number of hours in the day. And when it comes down to it, it's never that I don't have time for something. Right now in my life, it's that I've chosen a job, I've chosen a career that takes 60 to 80 hours a week of my life, but I love it. I get to make the world a better place. I'm learning so much every day. I manage about 30 people. So all of those things that are important to me, I get to do in my job. So it's worth it. And as I mentioned before, pragmatically, I'm also paid very well, which is important because I have that Harvard debt. So I need to pay that back eventually. And so even today within my Deloitte life, if I get to the end of the day and I didn't get everything done, I have to self-reflect and realize that I chose to spend time on this versus that. And so part of it is just owning it. It's owning that we make decisions And it's never about not having enough time in the day, although we can all say we wish we had more time in the day. It's about I'm choosing to spend my time on this versus another thing. Like usually it's at 6:45, usually I'm working right now, but I'm choosing to do this because this is important to me. And if that means I have to stay up an hour later doing work tonight, that's okay. I've chosen that decision, and that's really how I see work-life balance right now. That's how I see my well-being right now. It's about a choice. And if I'm choosing to go to the gym instead of work another hour, then that's a choice I've made, or vice versa. That's a choice I've made. And I think that's really important.
Well, I think as students, we can definitely work on that, and especially the sleep and debt things. Oh my goodness. It's going to be a little bit of a process for us, I'm sure, until we can get to your level of being able to manage your schedule so well. Kind of shifting back to your career, though, how do you navigate that conversation with your boss to start something new and that doesn't exist currently in your organization? What did that conversation look like?
Yeah, I think part of it is right place, right time. So I've gotten lucky at several points in my career to get in on the ground floor of ideas that were already stirring. I think combining that with the fact that I'm not afraid to take risks. So at Deloitte, for example, the way I've navigated my career is not a typical path. I was promoted very quickly. So I came in at the level before that I am now. And the way I did that is that I differentiated myself. And I navigated the firm. It's a bureaucracy. It's a 200,000 plus person organization. I navigated it in my way, and that was courageously, and that was authentic to me. And I was successful. And so it's a risk to some degree, and maybe it wouldn't have worked out. I'm 2 years in now. Maybe I wouldn't be there anymore if I had failed, but I was okay with the concept of failing. I was okay with the fact that I might not succeed in the end. And I think that risk taking is so important. And then the other piece of it, I think, is communicating your ideas and just being someone that other people want to work around. So I would never create something. If I were in my boss's position, I would never create something with an employee or with a colleague who I didn't enjoy being with, who I didn't value their perspective and opinion. So another theme of this conversation, I think, should be like, be a person. So the idea of being authentic can be really summed down to the fact that if we're just people, like recognizing that we're all human beings and we're just people, that's so important. And it's never about putting up a facade or pretending to be something we're not. I'm going to go into a conversation with a colleague or about an idea with my perspective in an authentic way and just be a person. And if they take it, they take it. If they leave it, they leave it. And that's okay. But again, being a little bit open to risk and failure, I think, is a huge part of it too.
Interesting. I'm sure, oh my gosh, being such an awesome, amazing person as you too, failure is probably, a big blow, but maybe not as huge as before. Hopefully not.
We all hate failing. We all hate failing, but it's about how you frame it. I'm horrible at making mistakes. It's feedback that I got early in my career, is that literally the constructive criticism I got was that I was bad at making mistakes, meaning if I made a mistake, I would fix it automatically instead of like, I talk so much about reflection now, but earlier in my career, I wouldn't do that. I would just automatically go to the solution, I would fix it, and I would try to forget it ever happened because I was so upset about it. And I realize now that there's so much you can learn from a failure, even a small mistake, and that reflection is more important than the solution at the end of the day. So, I don't see it in the same way that I did when I was younger, but when I was 22, 23, it was a really big deal, even the smallest mistake.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I'm sure. But kind of going back to that reflection part that you're talking about, self-reflection. We have a question from YJ from the live chat. What made you go into diversity and inclusion in the first place? I know we've dabbled in a little bit, but what made you decide on that path?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I love talking about diversity and inclusion. It's stuff I do every day. So we can talk about this forever. I think if I reflect back on my career, it's really a through line of everything that I've done. So I mentioned the activism in high school. I mentioned my time at UCLA. I mentioned working in sub-Saharan Africa. I think really my first diversity and inclusion professional experience was working at UCLA when I got to work with the traditionally uninvited or disenfranchised populations of UCLA. So I mentioned I worked a little bit with veteran students and homeless students and former foster youth, and then also with our first generation families very significantly, and realizing how much power there was to including them in the experience and the conversation that planted a seed that I wasn't able to articulate at that point in my life. But fast forward to when I got to business school, I was one of very few openly LGBT folks in business school. We're an extreme minority in MBA programs and in the corporate sector as well. Tim Cook came out as the first openly gay Fortune 500 CEO while I was in business school. Before that, there were zero. So he's still the only one openly LGBT Fortune 500 CEO. And it was just a realization that it wasn't just a fact, it was a calling. It was something that I had the power, the skills, the experiences, and the passion to help change. And so when I got to Deloitte, I thought about my own life experience. I thought about my skills, my experiences, my passions. And I also thought about how within Deloitte Consulting could I express my interest and passion for social justice. And there were a few options. There are a few paths that I could have gone down. But again, right place, right time. I happened to talk to some people that were thinking about getting this offering off the ground and had done a bit of work to, like a year or so of work to really make this a reality. I jumped right in and I haven't looked back, and my whole career at Deloitte has been centered around diversity and inclusion now and helping organizations become more diverse and more inclusive. And it's really amazing to be able to work in the corporate sector on an issue of social justice that's really changing, per the question earlier, whether or not someone might stay at a company. It could change their whole career path. I could have that level of impact on an employee, and that's really exciting.
Oh, incredible. That's amazing that you've had so many great experiences with that. And, being such an amazing leader yourself, you've been able to help people along in their careers as well with that. So as we go ahead and wrap up here, what do you think are the three main things you want Bruins to take away from this discussion tonight?
Let's think about our themes. I think be a person is my number one takeaway. So just be authentic, be who you are. Be natural. It should never feel like a forced experience, whether it's a mentoring relationship or a classmate or colleague, or even a LinkedIn outreach. Like, be you. And if someone doesn't respond to you after you've been you, then that's okay. I think that the second piece is be open-minded, and that's open-minded to discovering new opportunities, meeting new people, being interested in something that you would have never thought of before, because the world is changing. The world is changing really quickly. And it's important for us to realize that, like I said, so many of my jobs didn't exist before I had them. There's so many careers that will exist in 10 years that don't exist today. So spending so much time thinking, oh, what do I want to be from this list of careers might not be the best way of going about it. I think it's about the skills and the experiences that we want to have from our careers, and not the specific roles or titles or organizations we want to work in. And then I hope the third takeaway is give back. I think that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. For me, again, being part of this conversation is one way of doing that. Giving back to UCLA is really important to me. Giving back to students is really important to me, fellow alumni, my colleagues at Deloitte, just in general. And that's so reciprocal. That is two-way. And when you give so much to the world, then you get so much in return as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Devin, for being with us tonight. You are an amazing mentor and clearly a huge resource for the rest of us in the Bruin family here tonight. So thank you so much for being with us. Before we wrap up, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Angela for a few closing remarks, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Nolan. To everyone watching, thank you again for joining us and participating in the discussion. As we embark on the second year of Bruin Career Insights, we're excited to explore a variety of new topics. So if you missed a portion of tonight's episode or you want to share it with others, you can find the recording on the UCLA Alumni YouTube channel. And if you're interested in watching previous episodes, you can find all of them there as well. If you have ideas for upcoming topics, or you know a speaker who you think would be wonderful for the series, please send us an email at careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu. Thank you to Devin and to everyone for being a part of tonight's discussion. And thank you again to our Blue, Gold, and Life members. Events like Bruin Career Insights are powered by membership. Through your support, we're able to provide career resources for all Bruins. We'll see you all again on February 21st for our next episode in the Bruin Career Insights series. Have a great evening and go Bruins!